Good morning, everybody. Darth checking in with you again. So, we're finally here. We are in the conclusion part of the series. Book 11. Robert Jordan intended there to be 3 books, then 7 books, and then finally 12 books. And we knew that the last one would be called A Memory of Light. So he wrote this with the mind frame that this was the penultimate chapter of the Wheel of Time. And he was coming off the back of the criticism that his last couple of works, I think Crossroads of Twilight is book 10, he was coming off the criticism that had received, and by the time he was writing this, he had his diagnosis. He knew that he was on a time limit. So Jordan, or maybe he got his diagnosis partway into this, but in any case, I set the framing on that to say to you that when Robert Jordan wrote this book, he knew coming out of the gate that the pace was going to pick up a lot. And he also knew that he wanted to pay certain things off. He has been building for so long, and finally he wants to show some of what he created. And Jordan is a master at it. He knows how to show things, you know. People give Brandon Sanderson a lot of credit for coming in and finishing the series and doing it in such, doing such a good job of it. And he did. He did a great job. Brandon Sanderson, you know, it's got some differences, and we'll talk about those. But that's not to say that Jordan couldn't have done it himself and done it well, right? I think that I've heard some skepticism from people in the past who said that Brandon Sanderson made things more epic, you know, or that they don't think Robert Jordan could have gotten to an end, that he would have kept finding things to add in and draw it out, and it would have made it less exciting. I think that you can point at Knife of Dreams and say that's not true. That is not true at all, because this book is incredibly exciting. And this book has conclusions and set up for new things, or really set up for old things that we're finally getting to the payoff for. My favorite, I think a lot of us would agree that it's our favorites, is the scene, you know, Landman Dragrin rides for Tarwin's Gap. Will he ride alone, right? That is going to be in the book. I mean, in the show. I cannot wait for that moment. Yeah. Nynaeve is, Zoe Robbins is going to kill that. She is going to kill that role. You can already tell. Okay, so, Knife of Dreams. I'm pretty sure that, I know that happens in this book. I know that Rand loses his hand. I never liked the way that Rand lost his hand. I think it's neat to show him get disfigured and show, like, you know, real war trauma here. And the blurry vision, of course, and that kind of thing. But he loses his hand because Cimarrock gets surprised. She wanted to put a domination band on him. And she gets surprised because she didn't anticipate the paralysis net that Cat Swain was wearing. So she didn't figure they would see through her mask of mirrors. It's really, we're past the point where this is the case, but to me, the Forsaken always felt like they should have been more formidable than they were. And we're past the point where they are actively threatening, right? I mean, they seem like a boss battle now, but one that we can pretty consistently say, okay, our character's going to win that. I don't think that anybody's terribly concerned about losing to the Forsaken up until Demon Dread shows up at this point. So Simmerhog not anticipating something that existed in her own time, or at least having a plan for it, doesn't fit the mystique that we've had build up around her. And I think that, that's fine. I mean, the White Tower doesn't live up to its reputation either. And Rand doesn't live up to his, if you listen to common folk out in the world, when we get those POVs. Thankfully, he doesn't, right? And the show is full of that, but it is frustrating to see characters be dumb. Because this plan that Simmerhog had is not the best. Not the best. However, what's more important is that it's exciting and it's action-oriented and it's got a quicker pace. So Robert Jordan's focus is there. That's where ours is supposed to be as well in this book. We get Matt doing some just awesome shit, being a guerrilla warfare master all of a sudden, I shouldn't say all of a sudden, that's not really accurate. But we get him engaging in some high-level combat chess, and they think that there's a bunch of armies out there. That's what I like. Whenever we get POVs from somebody else and they're like, there must be 80,000 men out there, or you can go back to book 1. A dozen wolves, my lord, a dozen wolves. I love that stuff because it just shows us that it's another way of highlighting, yeah, your characters are awesome. Look at this shit that they did. They tricked this person. They whooped them so bad they thought that it was way out of proportion to what was really going on. Yeah, there's some really cool stuff with that. We're finally getting the payoff of Eludra and her dragons, which is good at this point. Maybe that happened in the last book, I don't know. But, between here and A Memory of Light, somewhere in there, that's going to complete its arc, which we've been building towards. It's neat that we've been seeing the development of technology in this world. They're kind of entering the Steam Age, right? And catching up in a couple of places that they're behind technologically. And then, of course, that leads to the flash forward where people have guns. And that gets really interesting. Unfortunately, the Shan-Chan have guns. So that's bad. But still, very, very cool. Very cool. I like that payoff a lot. I really do. Let's see. What else is going on here? I'm pretty sure that this is the book where Perrin actually defeats the Shido. I think I said that in my last review as well. But I think it's this one because I know for a fact that as we start the next book, the first Brandon Sanderson book, that is where Fael runs into Masema and has Chafael kill him and the rest of his group. So I think this is it. I really like that Roland gets killed by Perrin. I wish that they explored that more. But we're moving fast. We don't have time to get into all the drama of it, so Fael is going to just keep it quiet, and that's cool too, actually. That is character development from her. Not needing to say everything that bothers you. That's great. I think this is also where they have their kind of night together for their anniversary, where they sit down and they eat and they talk, and it's a really sweet moment. It feels a lot like reminds me of a fireside chat, right? feels like the early series again, before all this stuff happened and these people got worn down. I think this is also the book where we finally get Tom's letter. Yeah. We finally have that read to Matt, and that makes a lot of difference. Oh. I forgot to say, a book or two ago, Nielsen died, and that makes me very sad, because I liked him a lot. He didn't do much. Talmanis does more, but I liked Nielsen, so rip. Actually, a good point on Nielsen. After he dies, Matt does something that you just don't see other characters do in books all that often. Matt specifically thinks back to Nielsen pretty regularly for, I think, the rest of the series. I don't know if he does it in A Memory of Light, definitely in Towers of Midnight, but he'll have little thoughts about him up through defeating the Golem and avenging him, and he'll just miss the guy. He just liked him, and he misses him, and I think that is so real feeling. It's one of those little details that you don't have to add in for a character, but when you do, even if the reader doesn't, consciously pick up on, hey, this is a fictional person remembering another fictional person from 5 novels ago who wasn't that important, just because it's internally consistent for them. Even if the reader doesn't pick up on that. That is a really cool thing to do in your story, because it makes your character more real. And folks, the leaves are just... I live in a good part of the world. I really do. Grateful to be here. So, we've got the stuff with Rand leading up to the meeting with the Seanchan. We've got the Borderland army, and we don't know what the hell's going on there. Perrin's fighting the Shido. Matt is marrying Tuon and trying to escape. And, I don't know how he knew who to trust and who not to trust there. Oh, yes, I do. Because, Tuon knew who to trust, and Matt trusts her. That's how he figured out that he could send Tuon back with Galgan. And thankfully that resolves the Suroth issue. One thing I haven't hit on here, actually two things. Elaine is queen by this point for sure. And since she is queen, she's doing queenly stuff. It's still not as interesting, but Robert Jordan definitely injected it with some life by throwing the Black Aja back into the mix. Here's Black Aja for you, go on now. He threw that in there. I think she impersonates one of them and gets stabbed for it, which is its own kind of dumb. She gets stabbed, and then the Dark Friend has her healed. That's some Deus Ex if I've ever seen it, people. Prophecy, no prophecy, whatever, right? That is some Deus Ex. That happened because plot armor. So, her plotline's weird. It's a little better, but we're just moving fast. The big one here is that Egwene gets captured. And Egwene getting captured leads to one of the coolest plots. There's been a lot of stuff going on in Tel'aran'rhiod, and there's been all the Tower politics. There's been the Tower politics, the Andor politics, the Borderlander politics, Rand maneuvering people around within his nations, though it's almost like he's grown past that at this point. Not that he doesn't still know how to politic, but that he's just too important and too busy for them to do anything other than try to assassinate him or follow him now. Otherwise, he's got you. He's converted you now. He's basically an emperor at this point in the series. And he's forging all these nations together. And yeah, it's a neat book. It's weaving together these threads into something that we're starting to get an image, We're starting to get a a look at the final picture here. And who knew that Robert Jordan had a full book's worth of notes on what the next book was going to be? I don't know how you squeeze the information that is in these 3 books into one book. Actually, I do know. The answer is that you don't, and this goes both ways. I'm of the opinion that it could have been 2 books, but instead it is 3 that would have been a little too small each. So instead of the 3 each being a little bit too small, Brandon Sanderson added some stuff. And, you know, he has every right to do that. I just wish that Andral didn't feel like you could plop him into Wax and Wayne. That's all. That's my one people critique Sanderson for Matt saying what Matt would be thinking, you know? And that's a hard character to write. I don't fault him for that character coming out kind of different. At first, you know, he does shape it up a lot better by the end. I think that Perrin, you know, retreading his same arc was kind of unnecessary, but I get that you needed to get to the White Cloaks somehow. That's probably a Jordan note. No, it's not actually. Robert Jordan's note on Perrin was he becomes king, and that was all that he said on it. So Brandon had to figure out how to get there from scratch, which is, I think I've got like an eyelash in my eye. So there's different things. We'll talk about that next time. I just wanted to hit you with a little bit of info on this one. Overall, Knife of Dreams has a lot more action, a lot better pacing. I feel like it is the setup novel for the trilogy to come, and that it's the beginning of our ending third of the series, if you want to frame it that way, you know. So I think Knife of Dreams is a good novel, though the pacing does cause some issues in terms of, like, there's a few more cracks in the logic and motivation of people, and, you know, we're kind of pushing them to where they need to be at this point, right? That's a bit of a tough thing, I think. There is, however, I'll mention this, there is some neat stuff going on between those last 3 books, which I completely forgot to touch on this, and this one. There's some really neat stuff going on with Verin. I am such a huge fan of Verin. We haven't really talked about her at all, but through this whole series, you know, she's got the moment where she almost poisons Cadsuane, trying to determine whether or not she can trust her. Verin is playing the game, son. Verin is in for the long haul. She is like, she makes me think of Littlefinger, kinda. Not as malicious, obviously. Kind of the opposite. No, Littlefinger's not the right example. What is the old lady Martell's name? Is that right? You know, my Game of Thrones is messed up, guys. The old lady who was the grandmother of Marjorie. Tyrell. Old lady Tyrell. Alina Tyrell? That sounds right. She kind of makes me think of her. Grandmotherly, just kind of hanging out in the background. Every once in a while, she drops the veil. And then she does something. And you go, oh, I don't know about her. That lady's got more going on than we saw. Yeah, she makes me think of Alina. That reveal is going to be really good, too. We'll talk about it in our next one. See, that's the thing. Everything that I've brought up in this book ends in, we'll talk about it more in the next one. This is clearly Robert Jordan setting up his ending. And he knew exactly where he was going with it. I think that, you know, in the last video I did, I was a little critical of the pacing for Rand's plot, because Rand did all this stuff, and then it feels like, relative to what he did in books 1 through, you could say 1 through 7, right? Through basically Crown of Swords. Relative to what he did there, he doesn't have half as much, maybe a third as much to do in books 8 through 14. And I think if that was instead books 8 through 12, that might not be the case. You know, it just, the plot got stretched a little thin here for him. So, folks, I'm going to give Knife of Dreams a 9. I think it's a great entry to the Wheel of Time. It is way too foggy to pass this person. It's foggy. Yeah. It's foggy. I'm going to give Knife of Dreams a 9. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the Sanderson trilogy. And just in time for the show to premiere. Have a great night, day.